Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining today's webinar, The Secret to Family Mealtime Success. I'm Jenny Ferrantino, a registered dietitian and Wegmans nutritionist, and I'm going to be moderating today's webinar. Please note that information provided during today's webinar is for educational purposes only, and it is not intended as a substitute or replacement for medical advice, medical nutrition therapy, or individualized nutrition counseling. I will be rejoining you at the end to moderate our Q&A, and I am now pleased to introduce my friend and presenter, Kirby Brantafort, another registered dietitian and part of our Wegmans nutrition team. Take it away, Kirby.
Thank you so much, Jenny, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Jenny said, my name is Kirby, and in addition to being a nutritionist here at Wegmans, I am also a mom of 3 boys. I have 2.5-year-old twins and a 6-year-old. And in my house, I am the one who loves to cook. I love nothing more than having a few hours ahead of me so I can play around in the kitchen and make a really nice meal for my family. But more often than not, my kids either don't touch what I make, or more of it ends up in hair, on clothes, on the floor, than actually makes it into their mouths. And while you might think, well, gee, that's really frustrating when they don't eat much or any of the meals that I so lovingly prepare, that part doesn't frustrate me. The frustrating part is honestly the mess. It gets very old having to clean up after them day after day. But I don't stress about what they choose to eat or not to eat at the table. And what I want to share with you today is something that I actually taught before I became a parent, and now I practice it as a parent, and I can tell you that it works. And by the time we're done, you'll have the tools and the confidence to really kind of remove the stress and just enjoy being together at the table. So before we can really talk about the secret to success, we really need to say, well, what is success? And what I'd like to do is actually ask you what you think success looks like. So I'm going to ask you all to fill out a quick poll. You should see that on your screen. So for you, are you hoping that you'll get your kids to finish more of a meal, enjoy what's being served, eat more vegetables, or not be so picky? So I'll give you just a minute here. I'm seeing it get kind of populated here. We've got almost half of you. And wow, look at this. I'm loving this. And I'll show you all in just a minute how everyone's answering. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And as you can see, it looks like in the lead here is to enjoy what's being served and to not be so picky. But across the board, it looks like everybody has a little something that they're looking to get out of today. Now, I will say it's great if these things happen for you. There's nothing wrong with that. But you might be disappointed, but I promise you won't be disappointed for long, that we're not actually going to address these things. Truly, we want to challenge our assumptions of what success looks like. And I want to share with you what we think success in childhood feeding looks like, and it's a little something more like this. So first, exposure to food. So giving kids the opportunity to explore and learn what their preferences are. If you think about it, as an adult, you have food preferences. They had to come from somewhere, and they all started with a certain amount of exposure and experience to different foods, different tastes, different textures. And the goal here is not to get kids to actually like or even eat a food, is to give them that experience that we all had that kind of formed our preferences. It's to help develop awareness of body cues and honestly to have some comfort in responding to those cues. So what does hunger feel like? What does fullness feel like? What does it feel like when I eat in response to those? So creating a space for kids to tune into their bodies without interference. And permission to be a young eater. Now here I would encourage you to replace that word picky with young and say young eater. See what that mindset shift might feel like for you, because this is a learning process, just like math or science. Just like we wouldn't expect a 4-year-old to be able to do calculus, we also don't want to expect kids to eat everything we put in front of them and have this expectation of what healthy eating looks like for our children. They need to learn what fuels them, what nourishes them, and what foods they do and don't like. And at the very end of the day, success is about trust. It's about adults trusting that they're doing what they can to support kids' health, trust the process, and that kids trust their bodies and they trust the adults who are feeding them to give them that opportunity and a safe space to go through this learning process. So we're looking at raising intuitive eaters that trust their bodies and increasing the likelihood that they will enjoy a healthy pattern of eating as adults. And you won't see that success until they're adults. So the success you'll see is during family mealtime, and now you probably want to know, well, what's the secret? Let's go for it. The secret is to stick to distinct roles. Adults and kids each have their own jobs, and we stick to those jobs. So adults decide what, where, and when to eat, and the kids decide whether to eat at all and how much. Now we're going to go into a little bit of detail here, but this is the if you take nothing else away from today's message. If you stick to these roles, that's the secret, and you can enjoy a little less stress and a little bit more joy. So let's go ahead and take a look at each of these in a little more detail, starting with the adults. So you're thinking, well, if I'm in charge of what should I feed them? So great question. And 2 simple things to keep in mind to get you started. We'd suggest a variety of lots of different plant foods. That doesn't mean you can't have other foods in there, but starting with plant foods and really emphasizing them because they are at the root of virtually all healthy eating patterns. And when you have that variety of different kinds, forms, colors, and food groups, that ensures that what you're offering is a mix of the nutrients needed for growth and development. And variety is just more fun anyway. And when you choose that variety of plant foods, you're exposing kids to what a healthy pattern of eating looks like as a foundation during their formative years. So that's a really great way to start. In terms of where, we would suggest sitting together without distractions. So sitting at a table or a counter, sitting down really kind of commits you to the act of eating. You all know what it feels like if somebody's kind of standing up. You feel like they're about to flee the scene. So sitting down and being together. And we know what happens when we have those distractions. If it's a TV, a cell phone, tablets, that distraction kind of robs us of the opportunity to connect with each other and bond, hear about each other's day, hear what might be going on at school. And it also interrupts the communication between your brain and your body. So there is a lot of signaling going on. And when you've got a distraction like a device, sometimes those messages get interrupted. And we really don't want to do that because kids are really kind of learning about that food and body relationship. So we don't want the distractions to disrupt the learning process for them. And lastly, in terms of when, really the times that work best for your family, but the key here is consistency. So consistent meal and snack times. Obviously, we want to adapt for activities, but having that foundational consistency of the kids know when they're going to eat. That builds trust and a sense of safety. It's a very basic sense of safety, right? That they know that food will be available and when to expect it to be available. And that's it. You do what, where, and when. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, aren't I supposed to at some point here get them to eat the food? Isn't that part of my job? But truly, this is your job. If you just stick to this, you let go. And then you can trust the kids to do their job, which is to decide whether to eat at all and how much. And I'd say in any order that they choose. So before we even go in here, I need to know what you're all feeling like when we say this. So I'm going to do yet another poll. I want to see what the feelings are out there. When we say you just let go, leave it up to them. Which one best describes how you're feeling? Are you anxious? There's no way this is going to work? Skeptical? I'm not really convinced? Or I'm excited to try. I think this sounds good. So give it a couple minutes here. I see some taking the lead. I'll share with you what's going on out there in just a moment. We've got a good portion of you have answered. And all right, I think we'll end it there. So it looks like we've got a good mix. I'm happy to see that a lot of you are excited. So I must have you kind of convinced. But a fair number, right? You're not really sure about this. At least a few of you are kind of like, there's no way. She does not know what she's talking about. So let me, for those of you who are excited and for those of you who are maybe a little skeptical, let me reassure you and remind you that we're talking about of the foods that are offered. So remember, you get to choose what's offered. You're the gatekeeper. They only get to pick from the foods that you have offered to them. And hopefully it's that variety of plant foods. And also, kids are born with an innate ability to kind of self-regulate. So they will eat the amount they need and be done eating when they're full. That changes over time when we've got a lot of input that kind of teaches kids that maybe what they're sensing is not real. Like, oh, you must be hungry, eat this. Or you're probably full, you should stop eating. So that kind of gets eroded over time. But we're all born. We all have it in us to know how to self-regulate. And kids truly do, and we want to kind of support that. We often also overestimate how much a kid, especially the younger kids, need and forget the frequency that we eat with. For a lot of us, it's 6 times a day, maybe 7 for those younger kids. And truly, if they stop eating, they're not hungry. So really, there's no such thing as too much or too little, and it's those comments on the types or amounts of foods that are chosen that really kind of interfere with that learning process of responding to internal cues. And as you probably know, the pressure to do something, anything in life, often has the opposite effect. So the same is true here. The pressure to eat it all, to eat a specific food, can truly have the opposite effect. So that's it. That's the secret. Easy peasy, right? Adults do what, where, and when, and the kids do whether and how much. But of course, we want to increase the likelihood that they're going to eat these foods. We have some strategies that we can use to try to just at least make it more comfortable, more enticing. So we give them every shot, every possibility that they have to enjoy some of the foods that are put in front of them. So let's share some of those strategies. First and foremost, get them involved with meal selection. Maybe they get to pick a meal certain days of the week. With the shopping, maybe they're helping to put things on an online shopping list. They go to the store, and some kid-friendly prep. This is actually a picture of my 3-year-old making his own naan pizza. And he loves making those. They take some ownership of the meal. Just be ready for a little bit of a mess. That's part of the process. But truly, when kids are involved, they are way more likely to try the food. Doesn't mean they're going to like the food, but they're more likely to at least try it. So it's about empowerment. It's about letting them kind of support their own growth and sense of confidence in the kitchen. And as an added bonus, this really helps them to develop some life skills along the way. So planning and preparation, things like that. Getting them involved. Next, offer familiar and favorite foods. So if there is a food that you know that they love, like strawberries or bread, my kids are really into pasta right now. So serve favorite and familiar foods as often as you can. They don't have to be the main event, but make sure that they're there. And it works on a bunch of different levels. One is that the kids feel seen and they feel heard. They say, oh, they know that I like that, and they put it out for me. And it ensures that there's at least something there that they might kind of nosh on, so maybe can get rid of some of your worries that you might have, that they might get up from the table and be hungry. And also think about it like going to a party. If you go to a party and you don't know a soul there, it is overwhelming and it's very intimidating. But if you go to that same party and you know one person there, all of a sudden it's much more comfortable. You're more likely to mingle. And it's the same thing with this. So once they see their favorite and familiar foods, they're like, I guess this other stuff isn't so bad after all. And they feel a little less intimidated. And over time, more likely to try some of those foods because it's paired up with something that they're very comfortable with. Next, let them serve themselves. So again, that empowerment, and so that they can really choose how much they feel like eating. And then they've got some ownership over that plate and know what it's like to take certain amounts of food and how much is left, how much more they might need. And if you're in a position where you actually are serving a kid, say you've got a toddler or something that's really messy or hot, we really believe that having a small amount is the key. So even as little as a tablespoon of each component, that makes it so it's in no way intimidating, and there's not this big pressure just in an amount of food. Even if it's a food that they love, doing a small amount will make it a lot less overwhelming, a lot less intimidating. And then try different preparations. Of course, different cooking methods, mixing the foods with different types of foods, adding sauces and dips, even changing up which meal or snack it's served with. There's no reason you can't throw some carrots on with breakfast. There's no rule out there about what meal has to have certain foods. So change it up and see what sticks, and then that increases the exposure, and it might help to the kids really understand that they like the food prepared a certain way. So we're going to do our last poll here. What would you guess in terms of how many times do kids need to be exposed to a food before it feels familiar? All right. Yeah, most of you are on to me, right? Yeah, okay. Most of you are right. So a lot of you guessed it, that it's in the ballpark of 10 to 15. So 10 to 15 times, right around 12. That matters, because the ability to be exposed to food is really what's going to set you up for a preference for a food. So if you think about it, kids don't have a reference point. We've been exposed to the world of foods. We've been exposed to different foods, flavors, textures. So we can make a pretty reasonable assumption about what you're about to experience. But think about when you've bitten into a food and you think you're about to bite something else, and it's like it rocks your expectations, and it tastes bad only because it wasn't what you were expecting. That's what kids are faced with like every day. So be patient and know that it takes time before foods become familiar. And they can't develop a preference or even begin to enjoy a food until it is familiar and they kind of know what to expect. So all of this is well and good, but what if you try these strategies and you go home and you're walking into what I call the circus? Maybe it feels more like the lion's den for you. And they're yelling at you, I don't want this food. And you've done all of the strategies and they're still kind of upset. I do want to share some more strategies with you in terms of phrases that I have on deck. I've come across them over the years and I've used them in my own home. And honestly, it helps us stick to our roles. It helps the kids be heard, and honestly diffuses what could be like heated situations. So let's go and look at what those might be. So how about, that sounds delicious. Let's put it on the menu for tomorrow. That's not what's for dinner, but I did put out whatever because I know that you like that. Why don't you pick from, whatever you choose, and we'll add it for tonight. So giving them some empowerment and letting them add to the menu. I already have the plans for today, but let's talk about when we could have that. And this is my favorite one. I use this one all the time. This is what's for dinner. It's up to you if you want to eat it. It's kind of like, deal with it. But like, honestly, this is what's for dinner. And then back at them, empowerment. It's up to you if you want to eat it. My husband even uses this one now. This is what's for dinner. So we repeat these over and over, and it becomes so very liberating. The more you say them, the more you stop feeling like you should be doing anything other than, what you're doing. Stop worrying about pleasing everyone and feel like you're really sticking to your job. One thing, though, is just be sure that if you make a plan to add something to the menu, say they wanted chicken nuggets and you say, we'll do that on Friday, do it on Friday. That builds that sense of trust again. Make sure that they're feeling safe and seen and heard. Keep these on deck. Take a screenshot. Having them on deck really helps you stick to your role and has some comfort in allowing your kids to kind of learn what they do and don't like while still managing your piece of the puzzle. So one action item here for you, I'd really like you all, if you're interested, to visit wegmans.com/feelyourbest, especially if this is going to mark a large transition for your family. There's some really great resources here. First, we have a section on kids at the table. This summarizes what we talked about today and gives a little bit more background. There's a section on healthy eating habits. If you go there, you'll be brought to this page, Eat Plant Foods. What I have circled there at the bottom is our healthy eating guidelines. This is just a nice list of some foods, those plant foods that support health, along with other foods that support health. If you're wondering, what am I supposed to really be shopping for, this gives you a nice snapshot of that variety of plant foods. And then bringing it all to life, all those foods have to make it to the plate somehow. So the last section I'd encourage you to look at is balanced meals and smart snacking. A lot of inspiration there. A lot of people asked, for us to share kid-friendly meals. And I would say that all meals can be made kid-friendly. So especially if you kind of follow some inspiration and then you actually have those favorite or familiar foods there, it makes any meal kid-friendly. So I would really encourage you to check that out. And then right back where we started. Here's that secret. Here's your takeaway. Your last action item is to try some of this, to decide what, where, and when, and to see what it feels like to let your kids decide whether and how much to eat. And some parting words. You're going to do all of the things, right? And they still might not eat. They might push back, and you won't be perfect. There's still things that I say, I'm like, probably wasn't the best way to handle that. But these are very natural human reactions, and it's all okay. My son asked me to make mac and cheese. I said, okay, I'll make it Saturday. I made it Saturday from scratch. Those of you who make it from scratch know that's not a small thing. And he literally had one bite. And yeah, a piece of me, I was like, are you kidding me? You asked for this, man. But then I remembered all of the things. I reminded myself the things that we discussed, that I can trust that process. And of course, the next day he ate a huge plate of it for lunch. So all of that to say, This is all okay. It's a transition. We're all humans. Kids are going to have feelings about the food. Let them have the feelings and acknowledge them, take them into account. But when you fall back on these roles, you create that supportive environment. It's filled with nourishing food. It's filled with empowerment and trust, and hopefully less stress and more joy at mealtime. So with that, we can go ahead and move on to, I think we've got some time for Q&A. Let me bring my friend Jenny back. Hello, Jenny.
Hi, Kirby. That was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for that presentation. I'll speak for myself before I ask you some of the questions that came in. As a new mom myself, I am so inspired by you saying all of this. So I hope that the rest of the audience feels the same way. And I know that they do. And we do have some questions. So the first one, we talked a little bit about veggies. And there's definitely that worry about like, what if I'm just concerned that my child is just not getting enough veggies? How do I make sure that he's getting enough, that he's getting those nutrients that he needs?
Great question. And first of all, I would say we don't make sure that they're getting enough. We offer them, right? So really, I get it. We want to do everything that we can to make sure our kids are healthy, but we don't really want to micromanage foods or nutrients, and just kind of trust that with that exposure over time, that they'll start to become comfortable with it. But that doesn't mean we can't make vegetables more fun and more approachable and do things specifically around veggies. Things like doing taste tests, right? So trying them in different ways, but also different dips, different sauces. Let the kids choose which vegetables they want to try. Let them try to get a variety of colors and have fun with the colors. You can even cut them into fun shapes. We have those spiralizers, and there's lots of different things that you can do with that. And I've even found, I can't believe it worked, but I referred to the broccoli as a tree, and all of a sudden this magic happens, and now my son is, my one toddler is like, oh, it's a tree. Of course I want to eat that. So just having fun with it and knowing that it's really about what happens over time, and that exposure is really setting the stage. And I will say, I think you mentioned like getting enough nutrients. If you ever have a concern that they're not getting enough nutrients, please bring it to the doctor and say, I'm really concerned that they're not getting enough X, Y, or Z. And, it's really would be a concern if you're starting to see an effect on growth or development, but just kind of trusting that it's the exposure and making it fun.
Trust the process. I love
Trust
that.
the process.
Yeah. Yeah. And to kind of piggyback off of that, talking about like a specific food group.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say my child only eats the bread or only is eating that one thing. Again, should I be concerned, or what should we do with that?
Right. That's another great question. And a few things I would say. One is, it's okay. So why is it okay? Because they eat so many times during the day, right? So that's one time that they might be eating the bread. But remember, you've got like 4 or 5, maybe even 6 other opportunities to get that variety in. So put the bread out. If you're worried about it, put it out once a day or once a week, whatever it is. But we get so focused on that one meal, we really have to think about what that pattern looks like. And remember, you also get to choose what's at each meal, so you get to choose when and when not to have certain foods available. And that you're in charge of when to eat, which also means kind of like you get to start the meal and end the meal. So if you're worried that they're going to keep going on and on and on with the bread, say, well, dinner time is done. So remember, there are things that you can fall back on that are within your role. So choosing that variety and just making sure it's there. And it's going to happen. It's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay. I love it.
So that kind of, thinking about eating multiple times during the day kind of brings me into the next question, and it's a little bit of a two-parter, so stick with me. So the question's around what happens for us busy parents who come home at the end of the day. We have a little bit of time, so we have to first get a quick meal on the table. Any recommendations for that? But second, what do we do for the kids who are just absolutely starving? They're famished. They need something to eat while we're cooking, even that super quick meal. Thoughts on snacks just before dinner?
Great question. So the first one, if I understand you correctly, you're just looking for ideas for quick dinners.
Yes.
So this comes back to kind of what we would call stocking for success. So having foods on hand that come together very quickly. So an example, I've got Dino chicken nuggets in my freezer at all times. So things that you can pop in the oven, things that are canned, things that are frozen that you can throw in the microwave. So it's really about looking ahead, knowing when you will have some scheduling challenges, and knowing that you've got those foods there. And absolutely making sure that those are some of the foods that your kids tend to like, because if it's going rapid fire, you want to make sure you get it on the table and everybody can kind of settle together. And then the second part of the question was, thoughts on snacking right before dinner. Yeah. So I encounter this all the time. And again, this is not a perfect process. And let me just say that, okay? There's not like this rule book that we're all like, this is exactly how you do this. Because sometimes these things happen. You're like, well, I said it's dinner time in 5 minutes. So what I do is I honor my kids' hunger. If they're coming up and they are saying they are hungry, I try 2 things. One, dinner's in X number of minutes. Do you feel like you can wait? If not, you can have something like I was going to have this for snack, or something that you want to offer them as just call it, this is your pre-dinner snack, or something that maybe is with dinner that you let them have a little bit ahead of time. So again, this is not an exacting science, but I think when we stick so rigidly to some of these rules, these are just supposed to be guidelines. But if a child, as we said, have the ability to self-regulate and they're saying that they're hungry, probably hungry. So see if they can wait. Give them an activity to do before dinner. Say like, hey, do you mind doing this for 10 minutes? I promise dinner will be ready soon. And if all else fails, just give them some food, I guess.
Give some food.
Does that, just feed the kid.
Right, absolutely. All right, perfect. Thanks, Kirby. So the next question we got is around dessert. And what are your thoughts on using dessert as an incentive to finish our meals?
Okay, love this question. So in general, I would say that any food, including dessert, shouldn't really be used as a reward or an incentive. It ends up pitting foods against each other, and it starts to put this other food kind of on a pedestal, like that's the thing that they're working towards. What we like to do is to kind of make all foods neutral. And in my house, I actually, if I'm having dessert, we'll put it with dinner. So again, it's like I have chosen that this is a food I'm going to offer. And now it's a food I'm going to offer with dinner, so you can choose to eat it in any order that you want. So using foods as incentive really kind of disrupts the ability to respond to hunger and fullness, because now instead of dealing with the plate in front of them, they're thinking about this other food that they're trying to get to, and it really kind of disrupts the process. So food is just food, and it truly should just be treated that way, I think. So.
Perfect. I love that one. And I want to piggyback to the first question we had, which is around veggies. So thinking back to our veggies, what are your thoughts on sneaking veggies in, like, making this tomato sauce and packing everything in? Or you said making homemade mac and cheese for the kids, pureeing all of those winter veggies. What are your thoughts on that?
So I will say adding vegetables to a meal is a great strategy to get more vegetables in. So if you're putting it in mac and cheese or putting it in like meatloaf or meatballs and things like that. So it is a strategy to get more vegetables. The one word of caution I would say is with that word sneaking. So it's not that you have to always announce everything that's in the meal, but being transparent about what the kids are eating is really key for a couple of reasons. One is back to that trust. So we said that this is about trust, and what would it feel like if you found out that somebody put something in your food that you didn't know about? It kind of takes away some of that trust. So especially if it is a favorite food. So if I started messing with my son's mac and cheese and told him that after the fact that I did something to it that he didn't know about, might not be the best. So it might be like, hey, buddy, I'm going to make mac and cheese, but just so you know, I'm going to try something different tonight. So again, for that trust, and also to give them the opportunity to learn what they like and don't like. So they might be eating something with broccoli in it and don't even know that they like the broccoli. And that's a part of developing those food preferences. So I think it's great to put it in the food, but to be transparent when you can, to give them that opportunity and to kind of, preserve the trust.
Fantastic. I appreciate that. We ended on the trust, and I love that, Kirby. Thank you so much. That is the end of our time today, but we really appreciate the presentation today. We appreciate everybody joining us. And thank you so much, and have fun enjoying family mealtime. Bye.